Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, 1962, is a groundbreaking environmental science book that exposed the dangers of synthetic pesticides and their impact on ecosystems, human health, and the planet as a whole. The book catalyzed the modern environmental movement, leading to significant changes in public policy and attitudes toward environmental protection. Carson's work combines meticulous scientific research with eloquent prose, presenting a compelling case for the responsible use of chemicals and the need to safeguard nature. Below is a comprehensive summary of the book's key themes, arguments, and chapters. Introduction. A Fable for Tomorrow. Carson begins the book with a haunting fictional account of a town in the United States where nature has gone silent. Birds no longer sing, bees no longer pollinate, and fish no longer swim in streams poisoned by chemicals. This dystopian vision sets the stage for her central argument. Human actions, particularly the indiscriminate use of pesticides, are causing irreversible harm to the environment. This fable, though fictional, is based on real-world examples of environmental degradation observed in mid-20th century America. Chapter 1. The Obligation to Endure. Carson emphasizes humanity's unique power to alter the natural world, often with devastating consequences. She critiques the widespread use of synthetic chemicals, particularly pesticides like DDT, which persist in the environment long after their application. These chemicals, she argues, have entered the food chain, affecting both wildlife and human populations. Carson warns of the unintended consequences of technological advancements, urging society to consider the long-term impact of chemical use on ecosystems and future generations. Chapter 2. The Elixirs of Death. This chapter provides a detailed history of pesticide development, focusing on synthetic organic compounds like DDT, aldrin, and dieldrin. Originally developed during World War II for military purposes, these chemicals were later marketed for agricultural and domestic use. Carson critiques the chemical industry's promotion of pesticides as miracle solutions, pointing out their toxicity to non-target species and the development of pesticide-resistant pests. Chapter 3. Surface waters and underground seas. Carson examines the contamination of water sources by pesticides, detailing how chemicals seep into rivers, lakes, and underground aquifers. She describes how pesticides enter aquatic ecosystems, killing fish, amphibians, and other aquatic organisms while disrupting the delicate balance of these environments. She highlights the interconnectedness of water systems, emphasizing that contamination in one area can have far-reaching consequences. Chapter 4. The Contamination of the World of Air. In this chapter, Carson explores how pesticides are dispersed through the air during application. She describes cases where aerial spraying has caused widespread environmental damage, harming crops, wildlife, and human health. She emphasizes the inability of pesticides to remain localized, pointing out that once released, they spread uncontrollably, affecting areas far from the original site of application. Chapter 5. Realms of the Soil. Carson underscores the critical role of soil in sustaining life and how pesticides disrupt soil ecosystems. She describes how chemicals kill beneficial microorganisms, earthworms, and other organisms essential for healthy soil. This chapter highlights the long-term consequences of soil contamination, including reduced fertility, erosion, and the accumulation of toxins that harm plants and animals. Chapter 6. Earth's Green Mantle. Focusing on the impact of pesticides on plants, Carson describes how chemicals designed to target weeds and pests also harm beneficial vegetation. Forests, meadows, and gardens suffer from indiscriminate spraying, leading to a loss of biodiversity and the degradation of ecosystems. Carson argues that the destruction of plant life has cascading effects on wildlife and humans, disrupting food chains and reducing the planet's capacity to sustain life. Chapter 7. Needless Havoc. Carson presents case studies of pesticide-related disasters, such as mass die-offs of birds, fish, and other wildlife following chemical applications. She critiques the lack of foresight and responsibility among government agencies and chemical companies, arguing that much of the damage could have been avoided with proper research and regulation. She also highlights the emotional and aesthetic losses associated with environmental degradation, such as the disappearance of bird songs and natural beauty. Chapter 8. And No Birds Sing. This chapter explores the impact of pesticides on bird populations, one of Carson's central concerns. She describes how chemicals poison birds directly or indirectly through the food chain. Carson explains how pesticides reduce reproductive success, causing population declines in species like bald eagles and peregrine falcons. The title of the chapter underscores the profound silence left in the absence of birds, symbolizing the broader ecological damage caused by human actions. Chapter 9. Rivers of Death. Carson examines the effects of pesticides on aquatic ecosystems, documenting cases where rivers and streams became toxic after chemical applications. She highlights the death of fish and other aquatic organisms, which disrupts food chains and affects entire ecosystems. This chapter emphasizes the interconnectedness of terrestrial and aquatic environments, showing how pesticide runoff impacts ecosystems far from their point of origin. Chapter 10. Indiscriminately from the Skies. Carson critiques the widespread practice of aerial pesticide spraying, often done with little regard for its environmental or human health consequences. She describes instances where entire communities, including farms, schools, and homes, were exposed to dangerous chemicals without their consent. She calls for more responsible application methods and greater consideration of public health and safety. Chapter 11. Beyond the Dreams of the Borgias. In this chapter, Carson examines the accumulation of pesticides in the human body through the food chain. She explains how chemicals like DDT are stored in fat tissues, leading to long-term health risks, including cancer, neurological disorders, and reproductive problems. Carson warns of the dangers of bioaccumulation and biomagnification, where chemicals become more concentrated as they move up the food chain, ultimately affecting humans. Chapter 12. The Human Price. Carson focuses on the health consequences of pesticide exposure, particularly for vulnerable populations such as children, farm workers, and communities living near agricultural areas. She documents cases of acute poisoning, chronic illness, and birth defects linked to pesticide use. Carson criticizes the chemical industry and regulatory agencies for downplaying these risks and failing to protect public health. Chapter 13. Through a Narrow Window. Carson discusses the limits of scientific understanding regarding the long-term effects of pesticides. She warns that humanity's attempts to control nature often have unintended consequences, as ecosystems are complex and interconnected. She advocates for humility in scientific endeavors and greater respect for the intricate balance of the natural world. Chapter 14. Nature Fights Back. Carson explores how nature responds to human interference, particularly the development of pesticide-resistant pests. She explains that the more pesticides are used, the more pests adapt, rendering chemicals ineffective and creating a cycle of increasing chemical dependency. Carson calls for alternative approaches to pest control, such as biological methods that work with nature rather than against it. Chapter 15. The Other Road. In the final chapter, Carson presents a vision for a more sustainable future. She advocates for integrated pest management, natural predators, and cultural practices to control pests without harming the environment. She calls for investment in research and education to develop safer, more effective solutions. Carson's message is one of hope, emphasizing that it is not too late to change course and protect the planet for future generations. Major themes and messages. Interconnectedness of ecosystems. Carson highlights the intricate relationships between species and their environments, showing how human actions disrupt these delicate balances. Critique of human hubris. She challenges humanity's belief in its ability to dominate nature, warning of the unforeseen consequences of technological advancements. Environmental justice. Carson advocates for protecting vulnerable populations from the health risks associated with chemical exposure. Advocacy for precaution. Carson urges society to adopt a precautionary approach, prioritizing safety and sustainability over short-term convenience or profit. Conclusion. Legacy of Silent Spring. Silent Spring is a powerful call to action, warning of the dangers of unchecked chemical use and advocating for a more responsible relationship with nature. Carson's work spurred widespread public awareness, leading to the banning of DDT in the United States and the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. Her legacy endures as a cornerstone of the environmental movement, inspiring generations to protect the planet and question the consequences of human actions on the natural world.